Now, President Trump loves poor people. He just doesn't think that they should actually run anything or make any decisions. Now, during a campaign-style rally in Iowa on yesterday, Donald Trump made these remarks to a crowd. Let's take a look.
You appoint a rich person to be in charge of the economy. I said, no, it's true. And Wilbur's a very rich person in charge of commerce. I said, because that's the kind of thinking we want. I mean, you know, really, because they're representing the country. They don't want the money. They're representing the country. And they had to give up a lot to take these jobs. They gave up a lot. These are people that are great, brilliant business minds, and that's what we need. That's what we have to have. So the world doesn't take advantages of it. We can't have the world taking advantage of us anymore. And I love all people, rich or poor. But in those particular positions, I just don't want a poor person. Does that make sense?
I just don't want poor people in any of those positions, especially in that position. Well, let me go out on a limb here and say that he is the last person to speak about being qualified for a position. The man has no experience in politics or in government, and yet somehow he was elected to be the most powerful person in the world. How does that happen? So let's go on to the substance here, right? Now, personally, I don't think it should matter if you're rich or poor, whether you get a position. What should matter is are you actually knowledgeable about the job that you're going to be doing? Now, we can tell from some of his appointments that he picked people who were specifically not knowledgeable. For example, Rick Perry. Rick Perry had no idea what the energy department actually did. When he got appointed, he's like, or before he got appointed, I should say, he was like, oh, energy department, I can get rid of that. All they do is just go and negotiate energy contracts, right? You travel around the world selling oil and gas and fracking. That sounds great. I mean, we don't need it, though. I could get rid of it. Department of Energy. Oops. When he got appointed, he found out that they actually do a lot of important things. And then he was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, it looks like I'm not going to get rid of that because I had no idea what they did. Ben Carson, of course, is another example of this. He had no idea what HUD actually did. No idea. Betsy DeVos. No idea how to run education. So, look, his cabinet is rife with people who have no idea about the job. And another thing, they happen to be very, very wealthy people. Interesting. Now, again, when it comes to the Commerce Department, well, he appointed Wilbur Ross. Now, Wilbur Ross is a billionaire who got rich off leverage buyouts. So, he's a very rich person. And he's going to be running the economy. Now, in case you were wondering, by the way, what a leverage buyout is, and this is kind of important because it goes to the kind of experience Wilbur Ross brings to the economy, okay? Now, a leverage buyout is essentially a financial transaction in which a company is purchased with a combination of equity and debt. Now, this is actually pretty attractive for private equity firms to do these leverage buyouts. They'll find struggling companies that are, they're not doing very well. They come in, they say, okay, well, let's do a leverage buyout. I'll buy your company for, well, you know what? Let me give you the steps that they actually go through to do a leverage buyout. Now, say you run a private equity firm and you want to do one of these buyouts. Well, here are the steps. So basically, your firm, let's say your firm has about $10 million, all right? You got $10 million in capital, and you want to do this buyout so you can make a little bit of money and help the struggling business. Okay. Well, the private equity firm goes and borrows $90 million from a bank, say. Now, that's the leveraged part of the leverage buyout. The firm then takes the combined money, the $10 million plus $90 million, and essentially buys a company with it, a struggling company. Now, what's an interesting part of this is that they took out this $90 million in debt, but instead of taking that debt onto themselves, they put it on the company that they just acquired. So that company now has the debt, and the people who purchased the company do not. Okay? Now, the firm will then run that company for a couple of years to make it attractive for a resale. A couple years later, the firm sells the stake in the acquired company for a little bit more, and they end up making a pretty decent profit from a couple of years worth of work. Now, that's how a leveraged buyout normally works. This is actually what Mitt Romney did when he ran Bain Capital. However, there was one little difference in the way that Mitt Romney ran leveraged buyouts. You see, instead of merely reorganizing the acquired company into shape for a resale, you know, shoring it up and making sure that it pays down some of its debt and actually gets good operating costs and stuff like that, the stuff that you would do to turn around a struggling business. Instead, what they would do, these firms like Bain Capital, they would go and take the acquired company's earnings and use them to pay dividends to the shareholders instead of actually making the company better. Now, that's what Mitt Romney did to make him so rich. Now, the problem with this is that when you pay those dividends and you leave the acquired businesses saddled with all this debt and low on money, well, that can lead to, of course, businesses going out of business or having mass layoffs. That's something, of course, that Mitt Romney got in trouble for during the election. That's what all those Bain Capital ads were about. So there's a little bit of a problem here. So now how does Wilbur Ross factor into this? Well, earlier I told you that he ran one of these firms and worked for one of these firms and actually got very rich off of it. So you might think, well, look, he's got to know a lot about these buyouts. He's in the economy, right? So he's got to know something about the economy. Well, it's actually a small part of the economy. That's really focused on Wall Street stuff, and that's something that most people will never do. They'll be affected by it, as some of these layoffs and bankruptcies have, you know, people have been affected by those. That's, again, going back to the Bain Capital example, where there were people in the election in 2012 talking about how Mitt Romney, his company, went and bought up this company, loaded it with debt, it went out of business, and a lot of people lost their jobs. So, look, that does have an impact on the economy. Knowing how to do that doesn't make you qualified to run an economy. So it's not really the fact that Wilbur Ross, who ran one of these companies, was smarter and more qualified because he's wealthier. No. It's actually because he knows Donald Trump personally. I found an article in Fortune back from 1998 talking about Ross re-entering Wall Street scene after the early 90s saw a huge amount of what they call junk bonds. Now, those junk bonds, a lot of them went bad in the early 90s, okay? Now, so when this happened, Ross actually made a lot of money when working at, and get this, Rothschild's Inc. Yes, somewhere on the internet right now, a right-winger's head just exploded. Rothschilds, global financial elite. Oh my God. Yes, a member of the global financial elite is now running, of course, the Commerce Department, helping to run the economy. Now, look, and they even called this guy in this article the bankruptcy king, not because he actually went bankrupt. It's actually because he did a lot of these leverage buyouts and made a handsome profit while bankrupting companies. So and look, some of the companies, to be fair, he did end up doing these buyouts and actually making them profitable again. Either way, the guy was going to make some bank. So, and that's exactly what happened. But the point is that Wilbur Ross is the Commerce Secretary, not because he's smart when it comes to the economy, or just because he's rich. That's definitely a factor. But it's also because he has a personal relationship with Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump is actually the king of bankruptcy, going bankrupt like 6 times. Now, Forbes explains, in 1990, when Donald Trump opened his 3rd casino in Atlantic City, the Taj Mahal, he financed the project with $675 million in junk bonds at 14% interest rates. Now, that is super dumb. Now, why would he go and do this with junk bonds? Well, because no bank would actually really lend him money. So they give him a junk bond. Here you go. Here, take this garbage loan at this super high interest rate and have fun, because we know you're going to fuck it up anyway. Well, and what happened? Within months, according to the article, Donald Trump was struggling to make the massive bond payments as Atlantic City floundered. Oops. Oh no, I took out all these junk bonds and now I can't pay for it. I done fucked up. Somebody help. Daddy, help me. Well, it wasn't Daddy that came to the rescue. It was someone else. Wilbur Ross. Oh. See, Wilbur Ross, like I told you, specialized in financing struggling companies like Trump's Taj Mahal. Now, in the terms of the Taj Mahal deal, which are actually fairly generous, because there was a lot of creditors out there that were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to kick Trump out and we're going to take this shit over. Because obviously he ran this into the ground. Wilbur Ross came in and said, no, I got a better idea. Trump's famous. He can grab a crowd. What we're going to do is we're going to use his celebrity to our advantage. But first, we got to give him a good deal. So now, in the deal, Trump would give up 50% of his stake in the Taj Mahal, but would receive better debt terms and actually would remain in control. Now, that was a great deal. Donald Trump took that deal. He was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. Not only am I going to do that deal, but I'm going to take a similar deal for all my other troubled properties and use that, of course, and he used it successfully to climb out of debt and back into the Forbes 400. So, when you know all the context and when you know all the details, it turns out that it's not really an issue of being rich versus poor. Now, a lot of, progressive liberal outlets and a lot of right-wing outlets that are talking about the outrage about this, they talk about the outrage of the liberal outlets, and the liberal outlets are outraged at what he said, which there is a reason for, of course. I don't think they really dive in to the real reasons of why Wilbur Ross and why a lot of his cabinet is where it is. It's because these people backed Donald Trump. These people have done favors for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is repaying them for those favors. They raise money for him. And look, his cabinet is also the richest cabinet in the history of the presidency. So, but again, it's not about being rich. It's not about being poor or really having the knowledge to run an economy. It's all about what have you done for Donald Trump? Now, if you know anything about Trump, is that you should know that he rewards people who have helped him and who have been loyal to him. Now, with that all established, I actually am going to do some liberal outrage on this as well. Trump essentially in this had said that if you're not rich, you are not capable of running things. Now, this goes to his worldview. Now, let me give you an example of why he's completely wrong. Educated people aren't necessarily rich, right? Let's take an economics professor, for example. Now, you can have economics professors who are liberal or conservative. In fact, when I was going to college, I had a very conservative economics professor. Now, even that guy, who I disagree with a lot, he would actually know some of the basics of how an economy works. Right? And that would actually be a better pick than a guy who got rich off buying out distressed companies, loading them with debt, and then making a profit off them. It's sort of the same kind of disconnect that you get between management and the people that are actually doing the jobs on the floor. Now, management, and this is from my perspective working in factories, management usually thinks that they know everything and that the workers know nothing. When actually, if you're a worker, you're on the floor, you actually know your area pretty much better than everyone else. Okay? They don't work the floor, or in the case of the economy, going back to a different, to what the actual point is, without using this analogy, if you're rich, you don't understand the economy the way a poor person does, or the way a middle-class person does. You're not seeing the perspective of the economy of the majority of the people who are in it, because you're not in it. There are two different economic realities in America. One for the rich, one for the 1%, and another for the 99%. And so they don't seem to understand that. And in so doing, look, they live in their bubble, their wealthy bubble. They're not necessarily bad people, but they only see what's in front of them. They only empathize and see the problems with the people within their own social class, because that's the only people that they talk to. That's the only people they happen to be around. is the same people within their social class. So, of course, they're going to do policies and push for policies that are beneficial to their social or economic class. You see what I mean? And that's sort of what bugs me here. Because this is the swamp. If you're a blue-collar worker, do you still think that this guy is for you? He's not a champion of regular people. He essentially thinks that you're dumb. You're too dumb to make decisions. Too dumb to manage economics. He thinks, and look, back to his worldview, right? Poor people, he thinks poor people are poor because they're not good enough. Because they weren't special enough. They're stupid. They're lazy. It's the same conservative thing. I got rich because I'm so fantastic. I'm tremendous. I'm such an awesome businessman. If you're not rich, then you're not any of that. You're low energy. You don't have low energy. You don't have what it takes to be a wealthy person. So that's incredibly insulting and demeaning towards a great majority of people in this country. And look, and you have to remember, when you think of poor people, you're thinking of, okay, people who are on welfare and people who are on food stamps and, you know, that live in crappy houses, stuff like that. No. Look at the context. Donald Trump is a very wealthy person. He's a supposed billionaire. I don't necessarily believe that he's worth that much, but he's got a decent chunk of money. He is actually fairly wealthy. Now, to him, people making $50,000 a year, which is the median income in America these days, are probably considered poor to him. So all those people, this includes people who are in the lower middle class, okay, in some of the different areas, all right, across the country, people who are in the middle class, that he's calling stupid. So if you think he's just going after poor people, he's not. He's actually going after you. He's actually calling you an idiot. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.